Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Ben Data, co-chair of DSW. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. This community has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors, whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors, who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible. Founder Track, Kickstart, Growth Track, Friday Health Plans, Developer Track, Quizlet, Product Track, Palantir, Designer Track, Battery 621 in the Public Works, People Track, Exactly, and Spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement this week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pine Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our Hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget to use hashtag Den Startup Week to share your experience and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Welcome to this session of Denver Startup Week. I'm Serene Pappenfuss, a principal at Kickstart Fund. We're on a mission to build great companies in the Wild West by backing the boldest entrepreneurs with capital, community, and expertise for the journey. A lot of VCs happen to invest in Colorado. At Kickstart, we focus on it. We love our Colorado startups, Sondermind, Nomad, Pomp, and Havenly, just to name a few. Because we were among the first seed funds in the region, we know what it's like to start something before others understand your vision, which means we're willing to lead investments in promising teams. We use our experiences to grow your startup and recruit top talent. Our portfolio is filled with visionary founders like you who are committed to moving the whole ecosystem together. It's the network effect in full effect. Raising venture capital is more than swapping shares for money. It's inviting the right investors to complement your team. We hope we'll be your choice for seed funding in the Mountain West, and we hope you enjoy this session.
Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of those identities. There's something for everyone at DSW, thanks to all of our community members who submitted their best content to make this week what it is. And thank you for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all, especially our founder track sponsor, Kickstart. With that, please enjoy this session and the entire week ahead.
Thank you so much to our sponsors. I'm Julie Herzog. I'm excited to be our moderator today. Our team is ready to share insights about business exit planning from myself and these three talented entrepreneurs who each bring something very unique to the table. Between us, we all have several decades of experience. I'm Julie Herzog, co-founder of Fortis Law Partners, a Denver-based law firm, and Full Velocity Consulting, which provides outsourced executive services to our clients, primarily in accounting and finance. I've been eating, sleeping, and breathing M&A for nearly 30 years and counsel clients from startup all the way through IPO or sale. I've also merged my own law firm with another law firm 7 years ago and founded, grown, and sold my own clothing company. I can tell you that going through those experiences myself has really given me a practical business owner perspective as I advise clients. I'd like to start today by introducing Maxine Pryor of our panel. Maxine is the founder and president of Maxx Impact Group, a purpose-driven consulting firm. They provide clients with sustainable solutions to improve their supplier diversity, stakeholder value, corporate culture, social responsibility, and community impact. I love what Maxine has on her LinkedIn bio. She says she uses every opportunity when she meets people to provide a positive and lasting impression with everyone she encounters. And she looks at opportunities like that to encourage, inspire, and challenge others to be their best selves. Welcome, Maxine. Second, I'll introduce Elizabeth Ledoux. She is the founder of the Transition Strategists, which is an international boutique consulting firm. Her focus is on transition and succession planning strategies for family and privately held businesses, as well as individuals. She's a sought-after speaker, owns multiple businesses, and is a thought leader. She recently published a book, which you can find on Amazon. It's called It's a Journey, the Must-Have Roadmap to Successful Succession Planning. Welcome, Elizabeth. Cindy Brown, founder of Blue Moon Digital. That company is an industry-leading strategic performance marketing company. I had the pleasure of helping Cindy sell her company to an awesome company in the digital marketing agency called Merge. We closed that transaction a little less than 2 months ago. So welcome, Cindy. I want to give kudos. I want to give kudos right now to Olivia Omega, who put such an amazing panel together. When you look at it and just look at our bios, I provide legal and accounting expertise. Maxine has a background in operations. Elizabeth, transition, and Cindy, the journey of a successful seller. I'm so grateful to have everyone today. I counsel clients all the time that getting prepared is the most important aspect in a successful exit. If they don't prepare, it can sometimes feel like a game of whack-a-mole where you're trying to constantly, hit the issues as they pop up. Maxine, when we talked earlier, it was great because you gave this analogy of meeting at the gym with your new client that you're going to coach to kind of get in that awesome dress without Spanx. And you want the entrepreneur to kind of show up with the no makeup, a little flab here and there, and being willing to show their weaknesses. And you said how important it is for entrepreneurs to be vulnerable and show those weak spots. Can you talk a bit about that?
You're on mute.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's an honor to be here with you and the other distinguished speakers, also to be a part of the Denver Startup Week and the 10th anniversary. Working out and being ready, it's, we're all conditioned, and very many of us are very familiar with that unfamiliar, uncomfortable feeling of not being seen in our best light. Society and the beauty industry teaches us that, we've got to be on all the time. And then a lot of us who have high profile positions, we've got to be on all the time. When do we get the chance to let our hair down and kind of do some of the dirty work or the grunt work that needs to be done? And that's what coaches are for. Coaches are specialists in being able to see us in the raw, in our least, what's the word I'm looking for? They see us in at our worst, if you will. We're sweaty, like you said, it's in a current state. And oftentimes, I don't know about some of you, but I've heard about Spanx and the beauty of that transformation that they offer. But the goal is at some point to be able to take those kind of things off and be confident in who we are, and to have built up our muscles, and to have developed into a place where we are worthy of standing alone, even without such support, right? So for me, it's how do we become vulnerable? How do we become comfortable with being uncomfortable, and understanding that this is a journey? Kind of like the that dot on the map at the mall that says you are here. We have to be able to be real with where we are, so we can effectively and comprehensively and with wisdom be able to plan our journey to where it is we see ourselves going.
Great, that's fabulous input. Cindy, we worked with your team in a very short period of time to get you ready for sale. Can you talk a little bit about what you wish you had known at the beginning of that journey, and what advice you have for entrepreneurs?
I think I said my most common phrase was, I don't normally swim in this lane. I wasn't used to M&A world. I had Blue Moon Digital. I started Blue Moon Digital 18 years ago. And while I had been part of larger companies, I had never been intimately involved in the M&A effort. So what I learned, I mean, for sure, get the best advisors and get them early and let them know what your goal is. And to me, there are three types of advisors. Obviously, clearly, Julie and Fortis Law were terrific and understood the M&A process inside and out and negotiated contractually the best possible deal for us and protected us. Your investment banker, the person who's going to go out and find the right match for you, is critically important, and that they be in your industry and that they know your industry. That makes a huge, big difference. And then your tax attorneys, really know the implication of what the taxes are, and if there are things that you need to be positioned to get the most advantage of tax protection. But it's everything. I mean, number one, have squeaky clean books. We have a great CFO, and we had squeaky clean books. If I would have been sold, let's see, 8 years earlier, I had an embezzling accountant, and I would have failed in that. So squeaky clean books, follow GAAP. If you can get a quality of earnings, it's not as big as an audit, but validate that. Make sure all your contracts are in one place. So have all your client contracts, your employment contracts, your partnership contracts, your software contracts, your lease, everything, get that stored in the right place. And then the biggest one for me by far was have your cap table in complete order. And so if you have shareholders, you make sure that they have signed everything correctly, that you have copies of that. And then for me, I gave grants to all my employees, and I had a number of ex-employees, and I had to go find them because they were shareholders, and we had to have multiple shareholder votes. So it's a lot. It's a lot to get done.
That's definitely true. I thank you for that. In terms of preparing, when do you think an entrepreneur should start looking at that exit planning, kind of getting their ducks in a row?
Well, I mean, know what your number is. And then say, okay, realistically, what are the multiples? What are companies like me being sold at? Right? It took me 4 more years than I thought it was going to take. So it's just staying in tuned to your industry. I would make contact and find advisors early on, so they know what your intent is, and they can also bring you back to bring you back down to earth if your goals are a little bit too lofty, and understand what the market is doing, and then stay tuned into the market. I had actually wanted to go out and first originally was 2018, and then in 2020 we thought we were ready, and of course COVID hit, so we said we're going to pull back and wait until we get through this. But it's never too early to start. I mean, get your contracts in order. It's just simple stuff that if you don't do that administratively, it just bogs you down.
Definitely. Elizabeth, in your book, you talk about a roadmap for successful succession planning. Can you talk about, you also mentioned the importance of relationships and what you call the big six. Can you share a little bit about that with the audience?
Yeah, sure, Julie, thank you. So one of the big things that keeps people and entrepreneurs from moving forward when they start to look at business transitions is truly relationships. So considering things like fairness, equality, how do you take care of all of the many people who have helped and support you and will continue to help and support the business in the success going forward? And so what I've found, I'm an engineer by background and have been doing consulting work with private companies for over 30 years. What I found is you can have the best strategy in the world, and if you can't get the people to stay with you, to come on board with you and to help you get through this transition. The strategy really is of very low value. So relationships are key, and I think it's one of the dilemmas that keeps business owners stuck. We in the book we developed the Big Six, and the Big Six are questions: why, what, when, who, how, and how much. And again, what we found is many owners start with the how and how much. You know, how am I going to get out of here, and how much? And what we found is that kind of opens up a can of worms, because there's so many choices on, you know, how you're going to get out, and also how much and when, and you're going to get all of your equity out. So we like starting with what we call the 4 W's, which is your why, your who, your when, and your what. And what we've found is that by doing those 4 questions of the Big Six and understanding what you know about them and what you don't, then the how and how much kind of falls into place for you. And it really helps you to get to where you want to go. So I like what Maxine said, being real to get to where you want to go. And sometimes looking at those Big Six is not that much fun, especially if you're 5 to 10 years out, because it seems like a mountain. However, every decision that you make today gets you to where you want to go. And being real about it and being bold about looking at it, will help you to, as Cindy said, get to your number.
And Maxine, you help companies kind of set up platforms and processes so that they can really grow and also have the business operating smoothly. And when they get to the point, being able to exit smoothly and not have any problems when the buyer is looking at all of those contracts and things that Cindy mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about what you do to help your clients get their books and operations and everything in order?
Absolutely. So first things first, my first bit of advice usually is around beginning with the end in mind. We focus so much on launching, on scaling, on maintaining, that often we don't include that last step of the exit. And like both of these ladies have talked about, you know, oftentimes it's not until they get to the point where there's a decision or a desire to, I think I want to move on and do something else. And it's like, we think that's going to take a couple months to accomplish. And it's like, no, it can take a couple years if you're not ready. And what does ready look like? Well, if you are ready from the onset or from an earlier stage, then your timing looks different. Your opportunities can look different when you are at that place where you're ready to transition out. Another thing is, what happens if your goal in determining the what your end ought to be, what happens if that goal is cut short or you arrive there prematurely? You know, do you have escape routes? Do you have these off ramps, you know, where you can get off at certain points during your ownership? And again, that happens to be, are you already set up well to be able to make those kind of decisions if you're forced to, and it's not really on your terms, right? So soliciting the guidance and expertise of subject matter experts early on in your ownership is critical. A lot of times entrepreneurs get into business because they're a widget maker. And so they get into business, they're making their widget, they're doing their thing. No one can widget make like they can, but you need a marketing person, you need financial assistance, you need a legal team, you need so many people on your team to ensure that they're providing you guidance and information on blind spots that you might not see because you're so entrenched with the day-to-day or widget making. So there's a passage that says, in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. And so in the multitude of subject matter experts and guidance of people to be able to give you information and insights as early as possible, that's going to help make the difference in your outcome when you get to that place.
Cindy, you mentioned earlier getting your books in order and having some issues in the past with your accountant. How did you figure out who the best experts would be to kind of help you through this transition?
Of course, you know, you and I met years and years and years ago when I wanted to become a Delaware C corporation. We were a Colorado S corporation, and I wanted to give, I wanted to make my employees, to retain them. I mean, I totally agree with that. It's the people. And I think one of the most impressive things, for our new owners was that my executive team had been with me for so long. And that was really terrific to have that. But in terms of making sure that's where I'm just saying you've got to make sure that let's just say you've hired your brother to be your accountant, then I would make sure that you had some outside accounting expertise that were reviewing the books and making sure that you're following GAAP completely.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you've mentioned that you've seen a number of deals fall apart or sellers walk at or before closing. How can they know that the time is right for an exit and also know that they're kind of fully prepared and ready to go? Both, I think, from an operational perspective and also from an emotional perspective, right? In selling a company, it's like, this baby that you've grown for years. And when we have children and they reach 18, we all know, okay, it's probably time for them to make some transition. But with a business, there is no magic time. How do you help people figure that out?
Yeah, so business transitions. So one of the foundations for us is that a business transition is a journey. It's not really an event. And I have taught that all over North America to thousands of business owners in, shifting their thinking. There is and can be a single transaction. However, to Cindy's point, even in her situation, there were multiple transactions, potentially to her employees first, and then, a final transaction to an external person or group. So thinking about that and making it a journey is, I think, first and foremost. In our book, we actually designed this thing called the Business Owner Transition Confidence Survey. It's got 11 items in it, and we found it pretty helpful to help you to understand both functionally and also emotionally when you are going to be ready. When you have that confidence with things like clarity on your successor, how you're going to get out, your return on investment that you're wanting, how you're going to handle taxes, what you want to do with relationships, and if you're confident there. And then I think a big one is, what's your next adventure? We're starting to have so many opportunities with our companies that sometimes you might want to stay long and other times you might want to get out sooner. One reason why I've seen deals fall apart is because owners don't know what they're going to do next, and they're not excited about it. They're sort of afraid. So it's hard to leave something that's working for something that you are unclear about. So I would say, make sure that you understand your next adventure, that it looks great to you, and that you also are leaving this, to your point, this baby that you've built in the hands of somebody that you trust, a successor that you believe is going to be able to take it forward, and not only just take it forward, but help it to thrive.
Cindy, how did you decide that you were ready to sell? And I know, Merge has been an amazing partner for you. How did you know that they were, the best partner?
Well, I think because just what Elizabeth said, I knew I wasn't ready to retire. And so fit was extremely important to me. And it needed to be a strategic partner that was bigger, that could help us on a global stage and get us into much larger clients, and that I could learn from, and so fit was paramount. And now that I'm into this, it was 8 weeks today that we inked it. I couldn't be happier. I haven't had not 1 second of seller's remorse with it. So we did reverse due diligence. At one point, it was going so fast, I said, stop, hold it. You're doing due diligence on me. I want to do due diligence on you. And I want to come to your headquarters, and I want to see the best of the best people. I want to be absolutely solid in this. And they did it. We stopped the whole process. And I had my crew fly up to Chicago, and it was awesome to do that. Timing wise, I mean, I had to also think about my shareholders, other employees, and other senior management, and we were just ready. for change. I started the company in 2003, so 18 years in this, and you could just sense, we have been growing great. I've got 125 employees. I've got more open positions than I can fill, so we're in a really good market. But I knew I could tell, especially my senior leadership, they were ready for something more, and I didn't want us to get stale. And for me to keep them, on board and excited, it was time. It was time to join something bigger.
And Cindy, you decided to sell externally, and
Yes.
also, you sold internally by giving, a lot of opportunities for employees to share in the wealth at the time of an exit. Maxine, I think a question a lot of entrepreneurs have is whether to sell internally or externally, and how you analyze and address that question.
Well, it definitely depends on the philosophy of the leadership. Do you already have a philosophy of mentorship, of growing the folks within the company? Have you already identified your replacement? Like, do you have, tools in place to make sure that each person on your team can level up? It's very important to have that mentality, not just maintaining and making sure everyone is doing great in the seat they're in, but how do I grow you, develop you, prepare you to prosper on the next level? And who will be my person that I tap internally to take this endeavor on? In my line of work, I do a lot of work with small minority and women-owned businesses. And oftentimes, exit strategies are not a part of the conversation because they're still trying to build their book of business. We've got some who have been in business 20, 30, 40 years. We're still trying to fill that pipeline because of the absence of access, capital, education, opportunities, et cetera, all these unique barriers. And so we've definitely seen a trend and an increase in folks bringing their sons and daughters into the business to be able to learn and to grow, and those kind of things that have needed to happen. I myself have both my children as interns in my business. I don't know if they'll ever take it on, but hey, if I don't have them start now, I won't know if they're going to be a successor or if they're going to move on to do something else, right? And in that case, that then becomes part of the plan too. Okay, they're not going to take it. Who do I look for? Internal, external, what is the plan? And it's just a continual being aware on a continual basis of your next. What is that next move that's going to be taken? So, yeah.
Right. I see a lot of times entrepreneurs will come to me and they really ideally would like to sell internally, but the problem is they're already ready for a sale and they want to sell at millions of dollars, but the internal people do not have the funds at the moment to come up with that price. And then they'll have, an external buyer come and say, okay, we're paying, 10 million cash on the barrelhead. And that's going to be a lot more appealing than selling internally like they really wanted to. Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit about that timeline for planning for internal transitions? I'm sure you see that a lot with the families that you work with, but also other companies where that internal transition is important and they really see their successors as their team.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that business owners have trade-offs that they need to make. And the trade-off sometimes is the how soon I want to get out versus how soon my successor is ready to come in. And the successor has a few things that they need to do. Usually in our world, there is somewhere between 10 years age difference. And if you're parent children, especially in some of the upcoming generations, those are more like 20, 25, even maybe 30 years of difference in age. And so the successor needs to be ready. And then also you have to almost create a strategy, and there are many strategies that can be used, but create a strategy that over time gives the successor, the internal successor, the opportunity to buy. So it's very doable and really very, very rewarding to do it. It just takes a little bit more time, and it is a trade-off. So going back to what Maxine said is if you kind of start with the end in mind. And sometimes our timelines that we build can be up to 5 years, 10 years. It is incredible what you can do and how you can put the business in the hands of the people that you choose if you want to do that.
Thank you. Cindy, in your company, you had over 140 stockholders when you reached the time to sell. And when you came to us, it was really important that you be able to kind of share the wealth with all your employees. I know you talked a little bit about, the importance of knowing your agreements, what they provide, maybe repurchasing shares when people leave. What advice do you have for business owners that really want to share ownership with other employees in the company, and how would you advise them to think about going about that and preparing for an exit?
And I don't regret anything that I did, and I'm just so glad that we were able to have everybody partake and get rewarded in this. I think I would have really thought a lot harder. I think when we first filed, we got 500,000 common shares, and then we had preferred shareholders. I would have said, okay, let's back it. Let's go out to what you think the end game is, and how many people is it going to take for you to get there, and how many levels. I was really good about being, I think, extremely fair based upon people's contribution. There are a lot of my staff got second grants. Because I didn't know when they first started, that they were going to be a superstar. And so as they got promoted and stuff, I would give them more grants. I think I would have looked at the stock option bigger, more, because when you have owners that have real stock, it's no small thing what you have to do, especially now that I know the state of Delaware so much better today than I did just 12 weeks ago. That you have to go through, quite a bit. And, and we were guided, of course, by Fortis, which was excellent. We had to have a special board committee because my husband's also in the company and on the board. So we had to have an outsider. There's just a lot that we had to do. But the biggest thing I learned that I wish I would have known, and that was my own fault because it was in our shareholder plan. I didn't know that I should have used the option that I had. That is, if you're going to leave the company, then the company has the right to buy your stock back in 90 days. And because that's an incentive to stay. I had a vesting period of 4 years. And so it's like, well, I've got my stock, and so I definitely had some employees that left, and they knew they still had their piece of blue moon with it. But I think that would have, it's important to read the details, on something, especially like your shareholder plan. Yeah, it's, 39 pages long, but read it, and make sure
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs also don't understand the fiduciary duties that they own, to the stockholders. Right. So when you're giving people equity and you can't run the company anymore as it's, your baby, and kind of make decisions that are in your best interest and not the other stockholders' best interest. And so, when Cindy mentioned this process that we went through with this special committee, we really worked with the special committee to ensure that there's an outside independent person that could advise in terms of strategy and valuation. Is it the right time to sell? Are these the right terms and whatnot? And give kind of an independent view on that. Now, Cindy, you came away with approval of every single stockholder. So kudos to you. It just is huge in terms of like what Elizabeth was mentioning earlier, relationships, right? And maintaining those relationships with everyone, whether they're still, employees of your company or not. Maxine, can you talk a little bit about the biggest hurdles you see and help entrepreneurs overcome and getting ready for an exit? I remember telling Cindy's husband, who's her CFO, this is going to be kind of like a marathon. And the analogy I should have used instead is like a hurdling event, because you're running down this path. It's like a marathon, but there's hurdles that are going to come up. And if you're fit, like you talked about earlier, you've worked with the right advisors, you can just jump over those hurdles when you see them, and you can kind of make it to that finish line. I think sometimes if we're not prepared, that race ends up looking more like the Tough Mudder or Survivor or something like that, rather than, a race that should be, relatively easy. So Maxine, can you kind of talk about what obstacles that you see and you help entrepreneurs overcome through getting ready for sale and then the sale process itself?
Absolutely. So, systems, having systems in place, being organized, all those kind of things plays a critical role. I read a book once called E-Myth, where they talked about setting up systems in your business so that you're not working in your business, you're working on your business, and the business can run without you. And they gave a good illustration. I'll just kind of summarize with this. The fries at McDonald's are the same from Jersey to Jamaica. Like you don't require the same employee to have to travel to, there is a system in place that is recognized. There's brand recognition, and so systems, incorporating systems, and that level of organization to be able to articulate to the buyers, and be able to present to the buyers the package and what it is for them to clearly be able to see the history of the business, the current status and health of the business, and the potential future of the business is really important. I had a colleague who recently tried to acquire an entity, and they could not do the acquisition as they desired because they realized that part of the ownership had not engaged the employers as employees, but they were actually 1099s. And so it was it posed a particular issue, and, and then they were able to only acquire, maybe the active contracts because there was so much debt on another area. So there were so many discoveries, hurdles that were embarked upon during that journey that it's incredibly important, again, to make sure at the beginning that you are looking at these things and sitting down with someone and say, what does best practice look like for marketing? What does best practice look like for a healthy financial scenario? What does so that you can begin to incorporate those things now? Like with our firm, we do a lot of government contracting, and so we adhere to the most stringent of auditing requirements, so that if there's ever an audit, here you go. Here's all the information. If there's a sale that's pending, here you go. So for me, encouraging them to create systems, and I know it can be hard for small businesses because we tend to be building the train while it's moving. So, to be able to park it or take a moment to say, okay, this infrastructure was not in place when I started, or as we're growing, I need to tighten up here. Like it's imperative that we take those moments to do those health checks and make sure that that those check-ins are yielding good feedback for us, and that we're listening to that and making the right adjustments.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Elizabeth, do you have anything you want to add in terms of kind of the roadmap and obstacles that you see and how you help entrepreneurs overcome them?
Yeah. So years ago, we put together this concept of building a roadmap. And, sometimes I think when you're starting early, if you're going to start with the end in mind, you first have to, and I do use a roadmap, you have to figure out your direction. Which direction are you headed? And I always use the example of, we're in Colorado here. First, am I going to Mexico or am I going to Canada? Which direction? Because I need different things to get to each one of those places. And as I go there, depending on the season and the weather, I'm going to need different equipment and different types of things along the way. So I think of having a direction, knowing at least in general where you want to go, and then building this roadmap that can be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. The timeline really doesn't matter. It's all about you, because along the way, you are going to run into roadblocks. You might have to take some detours. You may just want to take some detours for fun because you're enjoying it so much and doing so well that, why not? So you never know what's going to come along your way. But as you do this timeline and this roadmap, the timeline gives business owners clarity so that they can see what needs to happen with the business. So as the business grows, what are my milestones? What am I trying to accomplish? And then as the owner what am I trying to accomplish for myself personally? Then in my role, if my role is CEO, I have so many tasks, especially, to Maxine's point, at small business owners wear so many hats. And by the time you leave, every single one of those tasks needs to be transitioned to somebody else. And we tend to transition the ones that are most important last, because those are things like cash flow, financial management, maybe key relationships with some of our suppliers or our customers or clients, the things that we hold dear. We transition those last, and they're often the hardest. So this timeline allows the owner to figure out how they're going to do that, when they're going to do that, and invite the other people in so that they can gain a commitment from the other person who's going to be their successor in all the different roles, because you might have many. Gain that commitment that that person wants to do it and is willing to take on the task. So I heard years ago that people don't live up to your expectations, they live up to their own commitments. So inviting the people in actually allows that relationship and that quote unquote agreement to be in place. So business transition, it is absolutely a team sport, both with your advisors, but also with the people that are inside that are going to be your successors. And I say it's a team sport because sometimes people think that transition and succession are the same thing, but if you look it up in the dictionary, transition means I'm leaving something, I'm transitioning out, and a successor is inheriting something. So we need both. We need the person transitioning to get out of the way, person coming in to grab on and take it and run with it. And I would just say the earlier you start, the better, because you have more options available. If some of the people don't make it, some of your successors, they just aren't up for the job. Their skills aren't there. Or I even had one client, they were in Canada, but a person was already a partner and fell in love, and his fiance decided they were leaving and living in Vancouver instead of the small town that they were in. Bye-bye, right? So there could be good things that happen. You don't have to be hit by a bus. So you have more options. And I think with the gift of time and this idea of the roadmap, you can interact, have great communication, and then put the odds in your favor of creating a successful transition in the end.
And Cindy, you not only had a good external team and you made sure you had the right experts in place, but you are also worked great at having this internal team, right? The buyer was so impressed that you had these team of experts and the senior vice presidents and whatnot that had been with you since the beginning.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how you built that team and how you kind of got the right people on the bus heading in the right direction?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing for any company, whether you're a widget maker or a service company, it's your value system. And to really, in my case, I took, at the time, I think we had probably 15 employees, and we went up to the mountains and spent 3 days, and we picked our values. And then really reinforced them, lived them, celebrated them, if someone violated a value, that was about the only way you can get terminated, is if you violated a value. But I think that's really, really core to have that. And I always say, for all of my staff, and there's a great TED talk on this, that you want 3 things. Every employee wants 3 things. They want autonomy, so they can set their own priorities and manage their day. They want, mastery. They want to be able to get mastery in their skill. And then they need purpose. And the 4th one that I had, that was from the TED talk, and they want purpose. I added, and you want to work with other A+ players. So, picking a team has always been huge for us. And I think also, for me, willing to roll up the sleeves and, put the fingers on the keyboard and get things done, and just having, tenacity and persistence, is a lot. you know, and as a CEO, I'm very much a working CEO. I love talking with our top suppliers and partners. I love talking with our clients. I love to tell my sales team, let me know how I can help. I'm a great closer. You know, just being involved with that, because you need that team. And we got to a point in the due diligence that I just did not understand what the disclosure list was about. And we were way behind. And when I finally looked at it, and it ended up being, I think, 139 pages
Yes.
of type text, of tiny text. I had to call a team in. I had to get a posse in. And it had to be people I trusted, because, you know, this was not being communicated. And I mean, and it's like, you need to be in downtown tomorrow morning at 8:00, and we're staying here until we get it done. And they did, you know, and because we were aligned, you know, they were enrolled. And it's really important that you keep that going. You know, because I needed that. You know, we were, you know, everybody says, oh, when you go through due diligence, it's the hardest thing, but they don't, you know, it's like, yeah, I know, but I've had babies, so it can't be that hard. And I said, I would have another baby before I ever went through due diligence again. Because it is a lot. It is a lot. And you think, you know, I thought we were in great shape, and there were a lot of things, a lot of hurdles and things that we had to work through. And you just don't know what you don't know. And so you really need a great team, you know, to be there and to support you.
Yeah, your internal team was fabulous and just really pitched in and got it done, just with super high quality work, and they were wonderful to work with. So we're about to start Q&A. So I encourage people, if you have any questions, you can send those via the chat, and I will look for those, and then we can address them. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Maxine. She's a big proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I love that Denver Startup Week has that as part of their values. I'm a mother of a disabled child, and it's been incredibly important to me and one of my passions. So I'd like Maxine to talk about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion when you think about your operations and also exit planning.
Absolutely. So now is a good time, as good a time as any, to ensure that those that we are working with are also brought into the conversations. Whether we're talking about the small minority and women-owned businesses who may not have access to this information, if they're in our circles, if they're in our supply diversity chains, you know, how are we kind of playing in the sandbox, if you will, with everyone who's there? What are the opportunities for mentoring? What are the opportunities for sharing insights, or doing some targeted outreach, you know, with whatever it is that we're doing? Now is a phenomenal time. There's so many resources and educational materials, and individuals like myself who, you know, who've been doing this work and who are just really being sought more and more right now. It's a phenomenal time to have that discussion and to see how they can be benefited. A lot of the small businesses, we look at 5 points, and there's so many businesses that have gone out of business that, for many who don't know, that area used to be known as the Harlem of the West. And so the amount of star quality celebrities that used to perform in that area or frequent that area has been unknown to many, because now, you know, a lot of those businesses, with the lack of a succession plan, an exit strategy, et cetera, you know, a lot of them are no longer. And so how do we work together to preserve the cultural richness that is here for all of us to really enjoy? We all have a role in supporting that, in participating, and ensuring that all of us are at the table, not just with a seat, but also with a voice and contributions and support and growth and all of that.
Excellent. I don't see any questions coming in yet through the Q&A, so I'm going to ask Cindy and Elizabeth and Maxine to share any other additional information that they'd like to share with the panel that we haven't already addressed. And I'll let whoever start that has anything on their mind. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'll take the first stab at it. My thought to everyone is, as you build and grow your company, just don't be afraid. It's so engaging and so fun. And yes, it's a lot of work, but there's so much opportunity. I love what Maxine said with, along with bringing in diversity and just exploring what's available. And as you go forward, one thing that I just want to leave with you is be brave, have the conversations, meet things head on. And as you build and grow this company, every single time you build and help somebody else grow in your company, your number one job as a CEO is to help others be successful, in my opinion. And so if you can help others be successful, and that's your number one job, as you do that, you will build an amazing team of people that someday may be able to buy you out and keep that culture and have the business thrive. And also, you are also building a team that a third party sales successor would potentially be interested in. So there are many ways that you can go, as long as from a foundation you build and help people grow, just as a start.
Absolutely.
Great. That goes back to the quote on Maxine's bio that I mentioned earlier, encouraging people to be their best selves. Right. I know Cindy has done that in terms of her team, and that's why she was able to get where she did, very quickly. In terms of, once she started that exit process, she had the right team members in place.
And that makes a huge difference. I mean, we've been very focused on DE&I, and actually sent a couple people to Cornell University to get their diversity training, because it's that whole area it's so big and broad, right? What does that mean? And then how do you attract that? And I actually got to sit by the head of HR for Google at a women's conference, and this was years and years and years and years ago, and she was asking how diverse was our employee base, and I said, well, it's really hard in Denver. And boy, she didn't take that for any excuse at all. She goes, well, then you better figure it out, and we did. We started really earnestly trying to do that. And we totally believe that, we have to create a safe environment so you can be your authentic self. And we walk that talk. I think that's really important. So I was just trying to think of anything else that I would recommend in terms of this process with it. And I think I just have to reiterate, I mean, that if you're going to continue to be with this, if you've got a strategic buyer and you're going to continue on, then you need to know what you think your role is going to be in the new company, because in some ways you lose a certain amount of your responsibility. So HR doesn't report into me. Finance doesn't report into me anymore. So I don't have to worry about cash anymore, or banking relationships. So then it's like, well, how can I impact, this next opportunity? And it's a huge time to say, well, what kind of team player am I? And how quickly can I absorb their culture and understand that, because it's so different now, and so getting a company that is a good fit, I can't even, that's the most important thing to me, as I've learned now. And we did get, we will ultimately get the number I wanted, but fit was the much bigger deal, and I've got friends who are entrepreneurs who have sold and been part of larger companies and don't like the fit. And now what do you do? So it's just so important that you really, really like, what that next step is for you, and that you can see the opportunity for yourself, because if you don't like it, then no one's going to like it. So it's really critically important.
Yeah, I had one of our entrepreneurs call me yesterday that sold and, rolled over equity as you did, and, as part of a larger organization. And I have to say that a lot of entrepreneurs are surprised by the change in role because they've been used to, calling the shots for a number of years. And regardless of how much diligence you do on the buyer, like you said, you did, you really don't know what you don't know until you're actually living with them, right? And, seeing where they leave their toothbrush or socks on the floor and that kind of thing. So, it's fairly common that entrepreneurs decide, they either exit and they're not sure about, what are the next steps. So it's so important, as Elizabeth said, to really figure that out. Like for you, it wasn't retiring yet. It's continuing in this other role in a bigger company with much, more resources, and also taking some things off of your plate, which is nice. But a lot of entrepreneurs kind of go through that process and then say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for. How, if I get out, if I want to get out, what are the terms and things like that. So I'm glad that things worked out as well as they did for you, and that you really found, the best fit. Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit about, you really focus and help, families as well go through the transition process and things like that, and figuring that out. You mentioned earlier a little bit about timing, right? Like my almost 14-year-olds aren't ready to, take over my business yet, but at some point they will. I know Cindy's kids, work in her business as well, which is awesome. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that family business transition planning?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So family business transition planning is really interesting, and we've done a lot of that over our time. So generation 1 to generation 2, coming from one family unit into, kids who are brothers and sisters. There are a couple different dynamics that you deal with in all family businesses. One is the parent-child relationship, and shifting that to a working relationship. And so what I've found is, especially in that generation 1 to generation 2, the owner has been the investor, right? The person who has their equity in there, the shareholder, or they've got their interest in there. They've also been the chairman of the board, and they've also been the CEO, and they also have been the head of a lot of different things inside of the company at many times. So figuring out how to separate those hats as you go forward, so that you can have, we talked about that timeline and that roadmap, so you can have places to move into as you leave some of the roles, because you'll leave some of the lesser roles and pretty soon leave CEO and leave chairman of the board, and then pretty soon maybe leave as an investor as well. So if by separating those, that's amazing. So that relationship, and then the equality and fairness, because there's so many that have to deal with estate and trying to figure out, if you have one kid in the business and one kid out, what is fairness, what is equality, and then going back to some of Cindy's comments about values. Different families have different values. Some you have to work in the business to be in the business and own it, and some not so. Lots of moving parts. It's just sort of an added layer to the normal transition. And then usually your children, if you're going that direction, do not have the funds to buy you out. So it usually is a longer timeline if you need money out of the business to make that happen. So hopefully that's helpful. Julie, thanks for asking.
Yeah. We did receive a question from the audience. It's, what other considerations need to be made during early stage evaluations in terms of the impact they'll make on the exit? So for me, what I think about that hasn't really been addressed yet is tax structuring on the front end. When Cindy came to us back in 2014, when she decided to be a Delaware C Corp, I had this provision of the Internal Revenue Code in mind, 1202, and it allows entrepreneurs to exclude the first 10 million in gain on a sale. So, many, many years ago, 7 years ago, we, structured the company so she and her husband and all the 140 stockholders could really, take advantage of that. So that was a big one for me. Also, I think a lot about intellectual property, how important that is, and to properly document, all of your intellectual property, make sure, your IP is in the name of the right owner, and really protect, all of your trade secrets. We only have another minute left, so I'll go ahead and wrap up and thank all of our panelists. You were wonderful. I really appreciate it. We have some M&A resources posted on our website. If people would like to take a look, it's fortislawpartners.com, and it's under mergers and acquisitions on our website. And our PR person, Farah, posted that in the chat for you. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Julie.
You
Yeah,
bet.
thank you for being our moderator and host.
Thank you.
Absolutely.